The sound which is as iconic as the character himself, Jason Voorhees, and the film franchise, which originally was just a rip-off of John Carpenter's Halloween, but spawned a mega successful franchise with mega fans. At the present time, there are 12 official films if you count Freddy vs. Jason, which I do. It isn't Shakespeare, but I personally love the sheer 80s slasher escapist quality that these films bring and the entertainment they provide. The plot's usually pretty simple. It's a bunch of naive young American teenagers pitted up against a crazy man-child, or in the original, his vengeful mother, usually in the setting of a summer camp and once in a spaceship. Part of the fun for these films is how creative the kills can be, how good the scares can be, how interesting the characters are, and just how entertaining they are for me in general. This is how I'll be ranking the Friday films today. Remember, these are my own opinions, so if you have a different idea of what you think is a good ranking list, then please let me know in the comments below, and let me have it if you think I've got it wrong. But remember, this is my own opinion, not a definitive list. Number 12 is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. We'll start with probably the most ambitious Friday film, but obviously not The Final Friday, as we would find out. Jason Goes to Hell never really seems to improve upon its impressive and slightly tongue-in-cheek opening, where a scantily clad woman leads Jason on a chase, which is a trap set by the government, who promptly blows Jason to smithereens. The rest of the film sees Jason's spirit being passed on to different people who are killing their way to Jason's surviving relatives. With the lack of Jason, The Final Friday just feels like a strange, gory sci-fi film with not too much to recommend besides a great opening and a fun ending teasing his eventual brawl a whole decade later with Freddy. I can definitely appreciate what New Line was trying to do with the franchise, taking a different direction and offering something new to the Jason lore, but this one just isn't as fun for me as some of the others. Number 11 is Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. This entry had a cool gimmick with the 3D, so I can imagine seeing it in cinemas back in 1982 would have been a fun time, but without those glasses, or in my case even with the glasses that came with my DVD copy, it just doesn't really add up to enough of an entertaining or scary ride to place higher in my rankings. Besides the character of Shelley, who is probably the most memorable character besides Jason, and has the dubious honour of providing Jason with his iconic hockey mask, the other characters are kind of throwaways. The stoners, the horny couple, and she's bizarrely pregnant, perhaps something the writer threw in to add more impact to her deaths, although I admittedly had forgotten this by this point of the film. We have our final girl, Chris, who has probably the most unintentionally hilarious monologues ever put to film, and her lover, Rick, who has an equally hilarious death as his eyeball pops right out of his head in 3D. There are lots of things being poked and prodded at the camera for the 3D effects, but obviously if you're watching this in 2D, it just looks plain ridiculous. There's a couple of creative kills in Part 3, like Andy's handstand and Debbie's arrow to the eye, but a few are off-screen or just rehashes from earlier Friday films. These films aren't generally renowned for their screenplays, but the writing in this one is particularly lazy. Even the ending rips off the original film. Yeah, I get it's a dream, but shouldn't Mrs. Voorhees have no head? There's a lot of fun to be had with Part 3, but for me it just seemed like Steve Miner was on autopilot after directing Part 2. Number 10 is Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I'll admit I have a soft spot for this entry, as it was filmed in Vancouver, where I lived for 7 years. Even though Jason is meant to be in New York, and is for one amazing shot in Times Square, the rest of the NYC scenes were filmed in Van. It's fun for me seeing Jason ride the SkyTrain. Other than that, this is one of the silliest entries in the franchise. Jason teleports more than once in this. I mean, there's no way he could have gotten downstairs so fast to take out JJ with that guitar. We also have some of the worst acting on display here. The girl in that opening scene is so bad, I can't help but laugh when she's unconvincingly screaming, "No! No!" Even though it's a very silly entry, there are some redeeming qualities. Kane Hodder is great as Jason, and the aforementioned Times Square scene is the best part of the movie by far. Jason decapitating Julius with one punch is a hilariously brutal kill, and Rennie is one of the better final girls of the series, and is given a decent enough backstory connecting her to Jason. Her Uncle Charles is one of the biggest douchebags in the series. I would put him up there with Trent from the 2009 reboot as one of the most unlikable characters ever, but it is good to see him get dunked into the barrel of muck in the third act. Also cool to see a young Kelly Hu in this film, and her death scene, although involving more teleporting, is one of the better ones in the film. Number 9 is Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. A very divisive entry amongst Friday fans for the simple fact that, spoiler alert, Jason is not the actual killer in this, and it is revealed to be a copycat. I like the idea that the film's killer was wearing a mask with blue lines rather than red to allude to the deception, a bit more subtle than Roy's angry eyes at the start of the movie. Despite this risky move, the film has some pretty slick kills and some really steamy scenes. It's easy to see in some scenes that the film was made by an ex-porn director. It's a bizarre screenplay with some kooky characters, but it's pretty entertaining. It's interesting to see the progression of the Tommy Jarvis character, and although it is basically retconned in the next film, John Shepherd plays it pretty well, and damn does he have a smashing body. I love the Reggie character, although his high-pitched screaming does get a bit irritating by the end. In my opinion, it's a pretty underrated entry in the franchise that, despite not including Jason, definitely deserves a bit more love. Number 8 is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, or Jason vs. Carrie as it's referred to by many. Part 7 is a decent entry that was famously censored to buggery, something director John Carl Buechler has been very vocal about in interviews since. You can definitely sense his experience in special effects, as the makeup effects we do get to see here are some of the best in the franchise. This is Kane Hodder's first film playing Jason, and he's fantastic, and he actually burned for 44 seconds in one scene, which was a record at the time. The plot is a bit silly, but gives the film lots of opportunity for some fun, particularly when Jason goes up against Tina in the third act. There's the usual young lineup of red herrings in Part 7, but some interesting additions like Maddie. I really like her chase scene with Jason, and you really get a taste for the nuances that Hodder brings to Jason here. There's also the character we love to hate, Melissa, who has one of the better kills in the film, although that sleeping bag kill is a classic and is one of the greatest slasher moments of the 80s. On the heels of the slightly more clever Part 6, The New Blood just takes itself a bit too seriously at times, but I feel that if the uncut version that was originally made was released, we might have had a much better and more entertaining movie than the watered down one we got. Number 7 is Freddy vs. Jason. Years after being teased in Jason Goes to Hell and plenty of rejected scripts later, Jason finally went up against another 80s slasher icon, Freddy Krueger. Before you say it, I do count this as part of the Friday canon, so if you're against that, then please let me have it in the comments below. I had a lot of fun with Freddy vs. Jason. Director Ronnie Yu fills the screen with plenty of blood and gore, and the scenes in which the two titans do battle are very entertaining. Robert Englund is, as always, having a great time with Freddy, with some really good one-liners and some dark humour, and despite a lot of fan backlash, I really don't mind Ken Kirsinger as Jason. He moves well, and that tall and broad stature makes him intimidating as heck. Of course, I would have loved to see Kane Hodder brought back, but Kirsinger still does a good performance as Jason. Unfortunately, the script by Damien Shannon and Mark Swift is what brings this film way down. The teen characters are so badly written and not very likeable, and again, for a film called Freddy vs. Jason, besides Krueger, the characters played a bit too straight and serious here. They could have had a lot more fun with the high school characters, and unfortunately it feels like a big missed opportunity. But having said that, there's some great moments: the bed-bending kill, the Freddy caterpillar, and of course the action-packed finale at Camp Crystal Lake. It's never boring, but a smarter, wittier script might have made it fantastic. Number 6 is the 2009 Friday the 13th reboot. You get the sense right away from the reboot that Shannon and Swift learned a bit from their Freddy vs. Jason script. The characters in this entry are a bit better written and slightly more relatable. It's not perfect, but it's a noticeable improvement. I like the idea that the film is more a remake of the first 4 Friday films than a straight-out remake of the first. Platinum Dunes, who produced the early 2000s Texas Chainsaw remakes, also produces this, and Chainsaw director Marcus Nispel directs this effort, and the comparisons in the design of the film are quite noticeable. Not a bad thing, as it was definitely the sleekest looking Friday film to date, but if we ever see another Friday film again though, I'd love to see a return to the grittier look of the originals. The kills here are entertaining. Jason here is more of a stealthy hunter than a straight out lumbering killer. which is an interesting and intriguing factor. The opening scene is probably the best and most brutal part of the film, and although the rest of the movie doesn't really hit the highs of that opening, there are some good moments, like the boat scene and the final chase. Aaron Yoo is effective comic relief, and I enjoy his scene in the tool shed with Jason. Jared Padalecki and Daniel Panabaker and Amanda Rogetti are decent leads, and Derek Mears does a great job of taking the reins of Jason Voorhees. Many have complained that Jason shouldn't run as much as he does in this, but seem to forget that he does run quite a lot in the early films. I mentioned it earlier, but Trent, played by Travis Van Winkle, is one of the most unlikable and douchey characters in the entire franchise. It's somewhat satisfying to see him taken care of in the final act, but getting there and listening to his overall douchiness is a bit of a pain to sit through. Overall, it's a well-constructed film with a few interesting characters and some well-crafted kills, but the scares aren't really there enough and the story isn't really that strong enough to sustain the whole movie. Number 5 is Jason X. It's a divisive entry amongst fans, but personally I have a ball with Jason X. It's basically the plot of Alien with Jason, but the self-aware and comedic tone in the writing is lots of fun. The film doesn't take itself very seriously, the characters are interesting and have some funny one-liners, a few of them from Janessa, played by Melissa Aid, like asking her colleague to stick their head out and have a peek, and my favourite line, "This sucks on so many levels," as she is getting sucked out of the ship. Rowan is a strong lead and excellent final girl. I love Lisa Ryder as KM, and her scene blowing Jason to bits is great. Kane Hodder is back for one last go as Jason, and he's fantastic as well. The kills are hilarious fun. The liquid nitrogen kill is more iconic than the film itself. It's also great to see a throwback to the sleeping bag kill from part 7 in that funny and clever hologram scene in the final act, which itself is a hilarious parody of the franchise. Although the budget constraints show in the special effects and other areas of the production, it's still an entertaining and fun ride with some creative kills and the ability to laugh at its own expense. Number 4 is Friday the 13th, the original. Here's a third act twist for you. The original Friday is not my favourite. I will say though that my top 4 are a close race, and I really hold them all in high regard as the best entries of a franchise that has definitely had its fair share of ups and downs. The original was one of many low-budget slashers that hit the big screen after the smash success of John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, and Friday definitely borrows a lot of the influence that indeed Carpenter had from Black Christmas in 1974, the first-person view of the mysterious killer being the most prominent. The overall cleverness and empathetic characterization, not to mention the effective tension building, is where Friday and Halloween are a bit different. Friday the 13th offers the horny young people drinking and doing drugs, but not developed well enough to care much about or feel anything when they're killed off. The film's saving graces include an interesting music score with some Bernard Herrmann-style strings by Harry Manfredini, great makeup effects by film legend Tom Savini, pretty impressive given the $550,000 budget of the movie. This added much needed effect to some creative kills, including Marcy's axe in the face and a fresh-faced Kevin Bacon getting an arrow through his neck. More great things about the original include 2 strong performances, the original Friday final girl Alice, played by Adrienne King, and of course Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees. Their fight in the final act is both hilarious to watch and contains some genuine moments. Betsy Palmer was theatre trained and was slapping around Adrienne King for real. The original Friday also contains possibly the best jump scare in the entire franchise, with Jason coming out of the water and dragging Alice underneath. Director Sean S. Cunningham has generally attributed a large part of the original film's success to this finale. The original will always have a place in my cold heart, but in terms of scares, entertainment and pure enjoyment, there are 3 more entries that come in a bit higher. Number 3 is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Years before Wes Craven tackled meta-horror in New Nightmare and then Scream, the caretaker at the cemetery where Jason was buried was breaking the fourth wall to tell us that some people have a strange idea of entertainment. From the opening seconds, Jason Lives knows it isn't going to be taken seriously and plays with the concept in plenty of creative ways. Whether it's the young couple in the VW Beetle aware of horror movie slasher tropes about a strange guy in the woods, or the kids at summer camp knowing that they are dead meat. Hi James. This entry, like Jason X years later, has an enjoyable parodic sense of humour about what it is doing, and it's clever and entertaining pulp. Made as a response to the negative fan reaction after Part 5, Jason comes roaring back to life in Frankenstein fashion, thanks to a grown-up and super gorgeous Tommy Jarvis, played in this film by Tom Matthews, in a dramatically different fashion to John Shepherd in Part 5. This leads him on a mission to stop Jason on his craziest killing spree yet. Some hilarious inventive kills here, like pushing the face into the camper van wall, the three-way decapitation, and a gnarly demise for Sheriff Garris being folded in half. I also like the look of the film. It moves away from the grittiness of the originals and adds a few sharp moments of cinematography, such as Jason standing proudly on the burning camper van and the big opening scene as a well-timed lightning strike brings Jason back to life. There's a lot to keep the audience entertained here, but it's that sense of humour which really made it a fun time for me. I love the Jason Voorhees 007 gun barrel and the floating credit cards after Jason disposes of the couple in the VW. It's definitely the car that spelt doom in the early days of the franchise. Number 2 is Friday the 13th, Part 2. I personally hold Part 2 above the original, which is controversial in many fan circles, but for me it improves upon the foundations that were laid down by its predecessor. The grimy, dark and isolated summer camp feel, amping up the big loud jumps and scares, and an excellent final girl in Ginny. This is the film that introduced audiences to the grown-up Jason Voorhees, pre-hockey mask and wearing an Elephant Man style sack. Still pretty creepy and effective. I love the chase at the end when Ginny reaches Jason's shack and the camera holds in her long enough to see him running towards her outside. A tense moment in a series that isn't as renowned for its scares and tension as much as its creative kills. Having said that, the kills here are pretty incredible. Part 1 final girl, Alice, is dispatched right off the bat with a nice pick to the head, along with Crazy Ralph with a barbed wire to the neck. Scott and Sandra are impaled together during a lovemaking session, and Vicky stabbed by an interestingly upside-down knife. And perhaps one of the gnarliest and could not be done today kills, Mark gets a machete to the face and tumbles down the stairs in his wheelchair. Director Steve Miner really went balls to the wall in this, and it's a fun, scary ride as a result, with one of the best final girl showdowns in the Friday franchise and in the 80s slasher genre in general. And my number 1 favourite Friday film, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Part 4, not so much the final chapter, but basically the last of the gritty original Friday films before the zombie Jason era of Part 6 onwards. It's the effort and care put into the characters and the writing of the final chapter that makes it the standout in the series and my own personal favourite. Corey Feldman as young Tommy Jarvis, a bright kid with a strong interest in makeup effects, somewhat based on returning makeup effects icon Tom Savini, who fills this movie with awesome kills and gore. Jason's death is one of the craziest special effects in the series. Our token teen party animals in this entry is still disposable, but vastly more interesting than the other entries. Crispin Glover as the dorky but lovable Jimmy is very memorable, and boy can he bust a move on the dance floor. Along with the overconfident and cheeky twins Terry and Tina, the young cast of red herrings and their interactions are played out more entertainingly in the final chapter before their decent death scenes. Some standouts being Terry being pulled out of an upstairs window and thrown to the ground, a great jump scare. There's also an amusing death scene at the beginning of the film when a frumpy hitchhiker gets murdered while eating a banana. That'll teach her for being healthy. This film is really elevated by Corey Feldman and the depth and naivety he brings to the character of Tommy Jarvis, which plays out quite humorously in scenes like the teenagers are skinny dipping and the voyeuristic observation of the love-making session happening in the house next door. Director Joseph Zito constructs one of the most tension-filled chases of the series in the film's third act, with Jason pursuing Trish and Tommy between the two lake houses before the final showdown between Tommy and Jason. Trish, as the film's final girl, is intelligent, stealthy and strong-willed. The plot device to keep Jason from harming her young brother really adds an extra layer to the overall film and improves the level of suspense in that third act. Maybe it's because the original intention was to end Jason in the series here that they made sure to amp everything up to quality levels for the final chapter. Great cast, funny writing and decent action, scares, kills and makeup effects, but that valiant effort that was made by the cast and crew behind Part 4 has made it my favourite of the Friday series. Thanks for watching, and let me know your favourites in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content from Road to Nowhere Films. And until next time... Oh God, it's killing me! It's killing me! Run!